Since July 26th marks the first month that this channel's been up, I've wanted to put together something special. Not only is this video a compilation containing all of the past month's stories, but it's also a collaboration with another horror narration channel. I've teamed up with Nikki Nightmare to bring a back and forth list of all of our creepy narrated stories. Since starting this channel, I've learned a lot and like to think that I've improved, at least hopefully. Since the quality of the recordings has changed over the past couple weeks, some of the stories in this video have been re-recorded or edited to make them sound a bit better, make them more fitting with the rest of the stories, and may be an improvement over the original narrations. Also, this channel compilation video is only half of each of our channel's creepy stories. You can find the rest on Nikki Nightmare's channel. A link to her channel and the rest of the stories can be found in the description below, and also as a card within the video. If you enjoy either of our narrations, of course, I'm hoping honestly that you enjoy both, show your support by subscribing to both of us. Without further ado, here are our stories. So, quite recently, I had a pretty strange experience with someone or something in the Walmart parking lot. I work during the day, and I really only have time to go shopping at night. Unfortunately, I get off of work around 10:30 every night, and by the time I get home, it's already past 11. My boyfriend works 12-hour shifts, so I prefer not to bother him with anything when we get off of work. So the other night, the Walmart parking lot was actually really full, so I had to park all the way in the back. The back of the vast parking lot is usually pretty deserted, but there are streetlights that help keep things generally visible. While I was walking up to the Walmart front doors, I felt like something had brushed my hair. Now, this is South Carolina, and it's in the summer, so I initially thought a bug had flown into my hair. Seriously, I hate bugs. With my fingers, I vigorously combed through my hair, but found nothing. Oh well, not a big deal. I assumed whatever had touched my hair simply didn't get tangled in my thick, curly locks, and instead just flew away. Anyway, after picking up my groceries, I walked back to the car and thankfully didn't have any other problems or oddities. By the time I got home, it was already after 1 a.m. As you probably know, there aren't any open aisles at Walmart at night, so every checkout takes forever. My boyfriend was already asleep, and the dogs were in their crates. So after I put my groceries away, I had some time to myself. I was watching some trash TV and dozed off on the couch. I was only asleep for a few moments before I felt something gently touch my hair once again. It's really difficult for me to quickly wake up, so while I felt my hair move, I didn't immediately respond. I thought the sensation had stopped and was slowly falling back into a deep sleep. But as soon as I started to fade out again, something pulled my hair. I threw myself off the couch and looked around, but the bedroom door to where my boyfriend and dogs were sleeping, it was still closed, and I could hear the faint sounds of my boyfriend snoring. I checked the entire house, made sure all of the doors were locked, and also slept with my bedroom door locked. Now, every night before I go to bed, I brush my hair out. Like I mentioned, it's really thick and curly and really difficult to manage. If I don't brush it and put oil in it, I'll wake up the next day with it completely matted down. So I brushed my hair out, put coconut leave-in conditioner in it, tied it up, and went to sleep. When I woke up the next morning, my hair tie was on the bed, and my hair was matted only on one side, the left side, where I swore someone was pulling my hair. I went to the bathroom and brushed out the matted side, and I felt this searing pain on my scalp. I couldn't really see anything in the mirror, but I took a picture with my phone, and my scalp, it was red with little specks of blood and what looked like some bruising. Today is day 4, and I haven't been able to relax since. I'm not sure if I'm going crazy or if something followed me home.
I'm just going to preface this by saying that I was the creepy party involved. I was in a small forest nearby my house one night at around 1 a.m. on a winter night. The reason for this was because I was practicing meditation, and sometimes I like to go out into nature during sessions. The place was deserted when I got there, so I sat under a tree and just calmly melted into the environment. I managed to get into a pretty deep state, so everything was sort of dreamlike. About halfway into it, these 2 young women, likely teenagers, came in. They were getting drunk or high and were giggling and tipsy. They sat down 20 feet from me, facing away, chatting, totally unaware of my presence. Then, one of them noticed me and freaked out.
"Whoa, what is that? Did you see that?"
she said to her friend. The other one noticed me, an ambiguous silhouetted lump under a pine tree, and shrieked. My response was in a monotonous drone. "Don't worry, I am a human woman." I was in a particularly deep state at the time, so I didn't really think about how it sounded until afterward. One of them responded, kind of stuttering, and asked what I was doing. I explained that I was meditating and that they didn't need to worry about me and they could proceed with the drinking. Needless to say, they laughed it off nervously and then quickly made an excuse to leave.
My best friend and I were thrift shopping one summer day. We were both 17 years old at the time. We were looking at the racks when we were approached by this man who looked to be somewhere between 35 and 40. He had very long, curly hair with a receding hairline and was wearing a black trench coat with black pants that were tucked into his combat boots. I specifically remember this because he always wore almost the same thing with a different gothy or anime t-shirt under the trench coat. He asked if we would like to go out for coffee with him, but we said no thanks. Instead, we tried to get back to doing our shopping. I ended up getting separated from my friend when she was trying on clothes. At this point, we thought he was gone, when suddenly I was tapped on the shoulder. I then hear him say, "Here's my number if you change your mind," as he handed me a piece of paper with a phone number and his first name written on it. I was a bit creeped out, but took it so he'd just go away, which thankfully he did. The next day, I was online checking my MySpace. Yeah, I know, I'm old. And I had a message from, you can guess who, the guy from the thrift store. I never gave him my name, so all I can think is that he heard my friend call me by my first name, and he searched every girl in my area by my name. He started sending me private messages saying creepy things like, "You and me in the bedroom. Would it be kinky or romantic?" I was really freaked out and ignored him, and eventually blocked him. At the time, I worked at the local mall in an entertainment store which sold movies, CDs, etc. One day, while I was at work, I looked up and there he was, staring at me from the section right from the register I was working at. When he saw that I noticed him, he left. This happened several more times. Then, one time, on my break, I walked by a gaming store that was right down the hall. And there he was, right behind the counter. He was now employed there. I was in that store a lot, and I knew the people that worked there, so I knew he had just gotten the job there recently. He then started coming in almost every day and staring at me, until one day, I told my manager what was going on, and she immediately went up to him and told him that if he didn't leave, she'd call the cops, and that we have cameras that point right at the section where he always was. He left, but after that, I never went to my car alone after finishing a shift. Finally, I noticed he had left his job at the gaming store. I saw him once more after that, which was at the local Walmart, where he told me that he had gotten some special edition of Bram Stoker's Dracula and asked if I wanted to come to his mom's house and watch it with him. He told me that I looked so cute. I said that I was with my parents, which of course was a lie, and that I had to go. And I hurried away as fast as I could. I still get nervous that I'll run into him again, even now.
I have two brothers who we'll call James and Ryan. I'm from Ohio, and the area I grew up in was known to be part of the Underground Railroad. I never believed in the ghostly stuff that happened, and I always thought on TV it was BS, except for one day, and it has stuck with me ever since. When I was 12, I was at home alone. Granted, I was a little bad as a kid, and my parents suspected me of doing it, but I honestly never touched the thing. So, my parents were gone for the day at my younger brother's soccer game tournament, and I had been in the basement for the better of 18 straight hours playing Call of Duty, when all of a sudden, I heard them scream my name. I ran upstairs, and they were asking me why the double doors to our office were on the ground. Not just on the ground, but hinges, screws, and even a screwdriver, all sitting next to the doors. Remember, I was 12. There's no way I could have done that by myself. Then, this one is finally what spooked my mom. My mom used to hear the toilets flushing, every night at midnight and every afternoon at noon. This freaked her out enough, but still never raised any eyebrows until the day she heard my youngest brother yell for butt wipes. Yes, butt wipes. Except he was 5 and was at school. She was the only one home. The final big one I can think of was when I was a senior in high school. I had just gotten home from practice and heard someone run up the stairs and giggle. Now, my youngest brother was also pretty bad, so I figured he was trying to scare me or whatever. I yelled up, "Hey, Ryan!" and no response. 30 seconds later, I hear,
Just kidding. Hi.
well, moments later, my mom calls and asks, "We're on our way home. What do you want for dinner?" I replied,
Anything is fine. Let me ask Ryan what he wants.
She replied back, "Ryan is in the car. We're coming home from James' soccer game." Well, this meant my dad was driving, and I was home alone, which scared the crap out of me. I tried to get my dogs to get them to leave the house, but they wouldn't walk past the kitchen counter, which scared the crap out of me even more. 1 month later, the house sold, and I have never even gone back to look at it. The people who bought it have a son in my youngest brother's grade, and I have always wanted him to ask the kid if anything weird has happened to him.
My boyfriend's grandfather is an antique collector, and one of his interests are dolls. Porcelain dolls, to be exact. They had gone and picked up this antique Native American doll. The previous owner had said to be very careful with it because it was special. Completely unfazed by this statement, he didn't ask any further questions. It's been about 2 weeks since he brought it home with him. The doll had been placed in the kitchen, and we went on with our days. The first 3 days were fine. Nothing abnormal really took place. It wasn't until the following day that odd occurrences started to happen around the house. My boyfriend and I were talking. We were laying in our room, which is down the hall. It was around midnight when we both suddenly heard 3 light knocks coming through the door. We quickly looked at each other, but kept quiet, and otherwise motionless. This was when I heard his grandfather say my boyfriend's name. I got up and opened the door while my boyfriend was busy getting ready for whatever task his grandfather had in store for him. Upon opening the door, I expected to be brought face to face with his grandfather. But no, there was no one there. Shrugging it off, I just ended up closing the door. After I closed it, I could hear footsteps coming from down the hall. I went out to investigate, but in the distance, I could hear both of the grandparents asleep and snoring. The following day, around the same time as the night before, all of the power to the house was suddenly lost, and it didn't return again until 5 or 6 in the morning. While creepy in and of itself, what was more scary was that throughout the night, there was one lamp that stayed on. I don't know how. I mean, it did occasionally go out, but for the most part, it was still somehow being powered. A few more nights went by without anything else happening. That was until just a few nights ago. All throughout that night, there were spurts of screaming. These noises weren't coming from inside of the house, but instead were closely right outside. Last night, somewhere around 2 to 3 a.m., I was laying down watching videos when my boyfriend instantly sat straight up and rambled off some gibberish. His words were nonsensical and were even mixed with numbers. I asked him what was wrong and if he was okay. He looked me right in the eyes. He screamed, and then he threw himself back down on the bed and started snoring. I asked him about it earlier today, and he said he has no memory of it. His grandfather is taking the doll to his shop tomorrow. Hopefully now, things will all go back to normal. Here are some of the photos that the author posted of the doll. Update from the author. My boyfriend's grandfather took the doll out of the house and put it in his antique shop. You know, it's strange. The air has seemed heavier lately, and everyone suddenly gets easily irritated. This is the kind of family that's usually upbeat, with a kind of an I can conquer anything type of attitude. Also, I've just recently had a few hyper-realistic, terrifying dreams. A few involved me losing my life in horrible ways. Then there was one dream in which I was captured and shown what they called my new face. I didn't have a face. There was a tall man there that said, "Look at the beauty I've created."
I have a bunch of things that happened in 2 different places. In house number 1, the previous owners both died in the house. They're really attached to the place and loved it, so they made their presence known. A lot of banging on walls, turning lights on and off, etc. They weren't scary though, and I liked living with them. I was really sad to leave them when I sold the house. House number 2, the apartment I rented after I sold house number 1, was another story. Having lived with ghosts before, it didn't worry me too much when stuff started happening in the apartment, since it wasn't too bad at first. However, it escalated quickly and affected me pretty intensely that I broke the lease early just to get out. Sleep is my jam. I can sleep anywhere, anytime. I could not sleep in that apartment though. I had horrible problems falling and staying asleep, and would have sleep paralysis frequently. I'd walk into the kitchen to find cabinet doors open when I knew I had closed them, since I live alone. The tub turned on by itself a few times as I would be walking out of the bathroom. 3 books fell out of the built-in bookcase onto the floor as I walked out of the room. They fell in a symmetrical formation pointing at 9, 12, and 3 o'clock, if that makes sense. I heard a child's sing-song voice while I was in the basement. The house was empty that day, and no kids lived there. That basement was the worst. 2 to 3 weeks after my friend and I saged the apartment, an overwhelming smell of burning sage woke me up around 4 a.m. It was like it was burning next to me. but there was nothing actually there. My previously healthy 2-year-old cat declined in health and was dead within 24 hours from heart failure. Rest in peace, Zeke. My new cat would frequently wake up in the middle of the night with a jump and a cry, as if someone had poked him very hard. One night, when my boyfriend slept over, he woke up to see 3 almost 7-foot-tall, solid shadow people at the foot of the bed, gesturing towards us and huddled as though they were discussing something. One of them noticed him watching them, pointed at him, and they all flew towards us in the bed. He turned the light on, and they immediately flew upwards into a corner of the ceiling. I moved the bed into the living room the next morning and slept with all the lights on, but I would still see shadow people now and then in the corners of rooms. I hated that place. That apartment was one of 3 in an old circa 1900 mansion, but for some reason, it was the only one that had bars on the windows, a steel entry door, which looked like it had been kicked in at some point, and a disabled, obsolete security system with sensors in all of the rooms. I assumed someone at some point had a break-in, but who knows? I don't think the horrible ghost people had anything to do with break-ins.
Backstory. This happened when I was around 9 or 10 years old. I'm 26 now. My family and I lived in a small town and on 5 acres. All of our neighbors have more than 5 acres, so it's like a large neighborhood. Lots of fields. We also had to go down a long gravel road in order to get to our house. But anyways, along with this story. So my mom, my brother, and I are driving back to our house from the grocery store. We get on the road that leads to our neighborhood, and my mom notices this guy following us. They were driving kind of aggressively, and my mom, being paranoid by the situation, thought it was weird. The guy kept aggressively tailgating us, and it was freaking my mom out. So, she sped up and tried to get to our house as fast as we could. We get inside the house, and my mom grabs the phone and starts to call the cops. She looks out the window, and the dude is stopped directly in front of our mailbox, just chilling there. My mom is super freaked out at this point and is yelling out the door to this guy. She screams that she's calling the cops and that he needs to leave now. The cops show up and we check out the mailbox. We open it to find a shotgun shell inside. The guy just left a shotgun shell in our mailbox. So, creepy road rage guy, let's never meet again. I should start this off with a bit of background information. I have bad anxiety, and I go on walks to calm myself down. On this specific night, I felt as though I was being watched. Whenever I feel like this, I will pull my phone out and go to the front-facing camera to see what's behind me without alerting the person that may or may not be there. I did this, and sure enough, someone was there. So I took 3 right turns to test and see if he was following me. He was. While in the moment, I didn't know what else to do, so I walked towards my house. I thought all was well until I discovered a camera that was placed directly outside of my window. So creepy guy that put a camera outside my window, let's not meet.
This story is something that happened to my mom when she was about 17 years old. Back then, she lived in a small town in Germany and would go on bike tours frequently. This particular day, she wanted to ride the bike to the forest, have a picnic there, and ride back home. She had done that a bunch of times. It wasn't an unsafe place, and she would always set up her stuff near the road, just in case. Anyway, when she almost got to the spot she'd usually set up at, there was a boy fixing his bike. My mom said he was about maybe 14 years old. My mom wasn't on the bike anymore. She was wheeling it since she was almost there. When she passed the guy, he jumped her, and the next thing she knows, she's face down on the ground. She instantly started yelling at him, stuff like,
"Get away from me!"
and,
"What the hell are you doing?"
He got up and started fumbling with his belt, trying to open his pants. My mom took this opportunity to just run away. When she got home, her mom didn't call the cops or anything because, well, nothing happened. My mom is still really mad about that. That isn't all of it though. Fast forward 4 to 5 years later, a few towns over, the same guy is on the news for murder. He would wait for women in the parking lot or in the park to kill them. He even stabbed a woman who was pushing her baby around in a stroller. My mom was glad that this happened when he was still young, because had he been older, he might have reacted much differently, and she could have ended up dead in the forest. Still freaks me out.
So, I'll put this into perspective. This happened a couple years ago, back in 2016, when Pokemon Go was still all the craze. It was common to see other people walking around strange areas playing it. I, myself, went out at strange hours looking for Pokemon and never really considered my surroundings very much. I learned pretty fast that it only takes one time for something to happen, even within the decent neighborhood where I lived. Anyway, my cousin was visiting for a few weeks that summer, which typically happened every year. He also happened to be into Pokemon Go. We both spent many hours of the night going out into the night and searching for good stuff within the game. As you can imagine, we never really thought anything of it. That all changed very quickly one night, around 11 p.m. Despite what I previously said about not thinking anything of going out around midnight, I'm usually pretty cautious. It began with some sort of rare Pokemon that came up on our nearby map. I told my cousin, and naturally, he was intrigued as well. We were in my room and I told him I'd go outside and look for it. He replied that he would be out in a couple minutes. Some extra information. We lived in villas on the corner of 2 streets. Fairly nice places, but very poorly lit. Not to mention the many trees to the back of the villas. My patio had a gate that led to our driveway. Anyway, as I walked out, I turned to the right, heading east. Down the dead-end road I walked, face glued to the phone. I elected to turn the corner down the other street, only it was much darker. There was no moonlight that night, and the cloud cover didn't help the situation. I'd only been down that road for about 10 minutes or so. I was now on my way back. For some reason that I can't explain, I lifted my head away from the game to see someone standing behind me. At this point, though, I didn't realize the true potential for the danger I was in. It was dark, real dark. The person was dressed in all black from head to toe. I couldn't make out what their face looked like, due to him having a hoodie pulled over. Keep in mind that it's summer, so even though it's dark out, this is in Florida. It's very warm here. This still didn't register though, because I thought it was my cousin, the one who said they'd be out shortly to join. The guy had a phone in his hand, but its brightness was too dim. I couldn't really make out any details. Since I assumed it was my cousin at the time, I decided to call out to him. "Brandon, did you find it yet?" There was no answer. "Hey, you haven't walked far enough. Keep going," I said as I stepped closer. But something didn't feel right. As I called out to him, he looked up at me, but again, no answer. It was at this point that I knew it wasn't Brandon. I felt increasingly uncomfortable, as I'd expect a normal person to say something along the lines of, "You've got the wrong person," or, "What? Who are you?" He had been facing me and standing still the entire time. I began to wonder how long he'd been following me. I called out one more time, "Brandon, is that you?" Again, no response. My chest tightened and I felt my whole body tense up. After that last call out, he began to walk towards me. First, beginning with a normal pace, but then began to rapidly pick up speed. I turned and began to speed walk. As I picked up my pace, so did he. By this time, his phone was off, and it seemed like all attention was aimed right at me. While my walk rapidly turned into a sprint, I could hear those heavy footsteps gaining behind me. By this time, I was nearing the corner I lived on. I ran as fast as I could, scared to death that I'd fall. His presence became even closer. When I turned the corner, I frantically ripped the gate open, not even allowing time to close it as I dashed straight to the door. Luckily, it was still unlocked. And in that small frame of time, I could sense that he was right at the gate, right before the patio. I quickly bolted right through the entrance to my house and locked every lock on the door. Although I knew it wasn't my cousin, I still held hope that it was him. I hoped he was just pranking me. I had to know. I nervously walked into my room to see if he was there. Sure enough, he was. I was so terrified that I could barely get any words out. We both tried sleeping that night, but being right by a window, we both had trouble falling asleep. From that day on, until I moved, I never again went outside late in my neighborhood. We both still often wonder who that was or what he might have done if he caught up to me. But these are things I take comfort in never knowing. So, mysterious hooded man, let's not meet again.
This has been my one and only true paranormal experience to date. I have had a few encounters with seeing shadow people, but this is one that truly terrified me. One summer evening, I had stayed up late watching Headbangers Ball on MTV with my older sister. I was a big fan of death metal as a kid. This was the summer of 2005. I got up to go to bed, and as I passed our front door to go to my room, I see this Native American man standing there. I will never forget. He was about 6'3" to 6'5". He had on a black suit and one of those old-timey top hats. He had long hair and these piercing blue eyes. I froze in fear for a moment and then began to scream loudly. My sister jumped up and saw him as well and threw a nearby salt shaker at him. Why? I don't know. And this was the part that got me. His face contorted into this incredibly sad expression as he turned around and phased through our front door. I will never forget feeling so bad for screaming at what I can only assume was a friendly entity, as dumb as that may sound. A few days later, I was telling the story to my dad, who was out of state at the time. He asked me to explain what the spirit looked like. Afterwards, he said my description sounded just like his great-uncle, who had died when my father was small. I still think about those sad eyes from time to time.
When I was in the 5th grade, my family moved because our previous house was starting to become too small for us. The new house was only 10 years old at the time, and in a really nice neighborhood. When we met our neighbors, they would tell us that everyone who moved into the house only stayed for about 2 years and would abruptly move out. My family shrugged this off, thinking that the previous owners might have just found new jobs, or simply didn't like the size of the house. Over the years, I had multiple creepy experiences in that house that were always shrugged off by my parents. Random phone calls coming directly from inside the house to our phones, things being moved in the morning, and even waking up to having my comforter being ripped right off my bed. Most of the time, I just thought that maybe I had moved stuff and simply forgot about it. However, I would still get moments when walking through the house of feeling as if I was being watched. Then there were times where our dog would randomly focus in on an object and follow whatever it was. Creepy? Yeah, but nothing terrifying. Fast forward a few years, and I was home alone one night. It was just me and the dog. Around dusk, I decided to take her for a walk through the neighborhood, just as I had done hundreds of times before. As I was nearing our house, I noticed that a light was on in one of the second-floor windows. This window led to my parents' walk-in closet, so I figured that maybe they forgot to turn it off. As I was walking up the driveway, I started to get that feeling of being watched again. I looked back up to the window and could now see that there was a silhouette of a person standing right by the window. I immediately stopped moving. Whatever was behind the window suddenly flicked the light switch off in the closet. Right after that happened, my dog took off towards the house and started barking at the windows on the first floor, circling the house, barking non-stop. I decided to quickly call every family member on the phone to make sure that nobody had gotten home while I was gone. After each phone call, I started to become more and more terrified as I learned that each of them were miles away at the time. I explained exactly what I saw to my parents, and my father told me to walk around the house and make sure that all the doors were locked. If one was unlocked, then I needed to call the police. Just in case, I grabbed a crowbar out of the garage and started circling the house, only to find that every first floor door and window was locked. This was the point when I became genuinely scared. I didn't want to enter the house for fear that whatever I saw might still be there, and in plain sight now. This was the point where I started to think about all the creepy small things in the past that had happened, and how I had brushed them off as nonsense. After about 15 minutes of standing in the garage with a crowbar, I mustered up the courage to walk into the house. The dog ran in first, and immediately started running around the house looking for something. I followed her, making sure that if something popped out, I would be able to hit it as hard as I physically could. The walk up the stairs to my parents' bedroom was the absolute most terrifying walk I've ever had. As I walked up, I noticed my dog was standing at the bottom of the stairs, staring at something over my shoulder. When I finally made it into the room, I checked the closet, but found nothing. Absolutely nothing. Honestly, I was almost hoping that I would see whatever it was so I could actually have visual proof. Some form of reassurance. I've never been more freaked out in my life as when I sat downstairs, waiting to get back home. Fast forward to today, and my parents still live in that house. They've said that they've had weird things happen a couple of times over the years, but yet they still don't believe that there's something paranormal in that house. Then there are my nieces, who always used to talk about a cat that they would see hiding inside of the heating ducts. From time to time, I will still house sit that place, but rarely will I ever spend the night. And if I do, the TV is staying on, and so are the lights. Still, to this day, I feel like there's something else in that house. I hope you've enjoyed these stories. Remember, this was only half of the stories that our channels have narrated so far. Head on over to Nikki Nightmare's channel to check out the rest. You can help support us by leaving a like and commenting so that we know what you thought of the video and how we can improve the videos going forward.